Hello, hello.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now I think it's 5 p.m. More than 2 minutes past 5 p.m. Okay. And also,
Yes, sir. Let's start.
so we can start now. Yes, yes, you're right.
Yes, sir. Uh,
So I welcome all of you. And today, in this unit, we'll have to discuss about the role of media in policy making. But ଯେକୌଣସି governance ହଉ, it may be democracy or even other forms of government. Policy making is very important. নীতি ନିର୍ଦ୍ଧାରଣ ଏବଂ ଡେଭଲପମେଣ୍ଟ ପ୍ରୋସେସରେ ଡେମୋକ୍ରେସି ଆଉ ମିଡିଆ ଇଜ ଆର୍ ଟୁ important elements. Because governments ଗୋଟେ ପଲିସିର ସକ୍ସେସ୍ ବା ଗୋଟେ ଏଫେକ୍ଟିଭ ପଲିସି ମେକିଂ କେବଳ ଯେ ଗୋଟେ ଇଲେକ୍ଟେଡ୍ ଗଭର୍ଣ୍ଣମେଣ୍ଟ ବା ଗୋଟେ ନିର୍ବାଚିତ ସରକାର ଖାଲି ରୋଲ ଅଛି ସେ କେବଳ ଭାବିବା ଭୁଲ। ଗଭର୍ଣ୍ଣମେଣ୍ଟ ଇନ୍ ଡେମୋକ୍ରେସି ପର୍ଟିକୁଲାର ଗୋଟେ ଗଣତନ୍ତ୍ରରେ ଇଟ୍ ରିକ୍ୱାର୍ସ ପିପୁଲ୍ସ ପାର୍ଟିସିପେସନ। ଲୋକମାନଙ୍କର କ'ଣ ଆବଶ୍ୟକତା ରହିଛି, what is the necessity of or what are the needs of the people। ଲୋକମାନେ ସେମାନଙ୍କର ଇଚ୍ଛା ବା ଅଭିଳାଷକୁ ଏକ୍ସପ୍ରେସ କଲେ ଗଭର୍ଣ୍ଣମେଣ୍ଟରେ ସେଇ ପଲିସି ନିର୍ଦ୍ଦିଷ୍ଟ ପଲିସିଟା ତିଆରି ହେବ। ତେଣୁ କନଷ୍ଟାଣ୍ଟଲି ଗୋଟେ ଇଲେକ୍ଟେଡ୍ ଗଭର୍ଣ୍ଣମେଣ୍ଟ ଗୋଟେ ଫିଡବ୍ୟାକ୍ ସିଷ୍ଟମରେ କାମ କରେ। ଏପରି ଧର ଗୋଟେ ପଲିସି ତିଆରି ହେଇଛି, ଇଭେନ୍ ଏ ପଲିସି ଇଜ୍ ଅଲରେଡି ଟେକେନ୍, ଦ ପବ୍ଲିକ ରେସ୍ପନ୍ସ ପ୍ଲିଜ୍ ମାର୍କ କେତେ ଇମ୍ପୋର୍ଟାଣ୍ଟ ଯେ ଗୋଟେ ନିର୍ଦ୍ଦିଷ୍ଟ ଲୋକନୀତି ଲୋକମାନେ କେତେ ଦୂର ପର୍ଯ୍ୟନ୍ତ ଆକ୍ସେପ୍ଟ କରୁଛନ୍ତି, ଗ୍ରହଣ ଯୋଗ୍ୟ। କନଷ୍ଟାଣ୍ଟ ଫିଡବ୍ୟାକ୍ ଚାଲିଛି ଏବଂ ତା ଉପରେ ଡିପେଣ୍ଡ କରିକିରି ଗଭର୍ଣ୍ଣମେଣ୍ଟ also make necessary changes in policy making. So media has definitely a very prolific role, very pivotal role. Media means suppose print media or it may be telecommunication, and with the various innovative methods in IT sector, information technology, there are various ways of communicating with the government or with the people. And particularly in this era of globalization, media have emerged to be the most powerful component in social management. पब्लिक ओपिनियन को सेव करिया पे, जनमत को सेव करिया पे मीडिया रो रोल, इट मे बी प्रिंट मीडिया और इट मे बी टेलीकम्युनिकेशन, इलेक्ट्रॉनिक मीडिया में जाऊ कोचे, इट मे बी इलेक्ट्रॉनिक मीडिया और प्रिंट मीडिया। सेनु सेमानकर स्टुपेंडस रोल गोटे जनमत को प्रभावित करिया पे एवं सेमानकर माध्यम रे गवर्नमेंट लोक माने कोन चाहुंतंती सेटा जानि परियो। So role of media technology in advancing the process of democratization, गणतंत्र प्रोसेस को गणतांत्रिकरण पद्धति को आगे नबारे बहुत सहायक हुए। तेणु पॉलिसी मेकर्स माने सबरे अलर्ट एवं से माने मीडिया को नेग्लेक्ट करि परिबेनी, बिकॉज़ दिस इज अ very पावरफुल instrument through which they can illicit information from the society ଏବଂ ଲୋକମାନଙ୍କର ଚାହିଦା ମୁତାବକ ପଲିସି ତିଆରି ହେବ। And what is a public policy? It is a process which allows the national government or state governments or even the local governments like municipality or panchayats to implement certain measures which would be in public interest. So public policy is where the community is trying to decide something as a community. And public policies are government decisions and actions to solve public problems. So there are various definitions to public policies. लोकनीति के हम भिन्न प्रकार संज्ञा निरूपण कर पाएंगे, but this is the main gist. Some scholars they have defined public policy as the result of the struggle over definition of the good society and the best ways to make it happen. ଆମେ କେମିତି ଗୋଟେ ସାଉଣ୍ଡ ଆଉ ହେଲ୍ଦି सोसाइटी के हम इवॉल्व करि परिबा, ସେଥିପାଇଁ ଗୋଟେ हेल्दी पब्लिक पॉलिसी दरकार। ଏବଂ हेल्दी पब्लिक पॉलिसी ଆମେ କାହାକୁ କହିବା जे कि ଲୋକମାନଙ୍କର ସ୍ୱାର୍ଥ ବା ଲୋକମାନଙ୍କର ଆବଶ୍ୟକତାକୁ ଦୃଷ୍ଟିରେ ରଖି ଏଫେକ୍ଟିଭ ହେଇପାରିବ। ଏଣୁ ଗଭର୍ଣ୍ଣମେଣ୍ଟ ସବୁବେଳେ ଲୋକଙ୍କ ଆବଶ୍ୟକତାକୁ ନେଇକି ଲୋକନୀତି ପ୍ରଣୟନ କରିବ। So in democracies, people elect their leaders at various levels. Suppose after the election a particular political party came to power to constitute the government, party in power हम जाओ कहूँ। And if the leaders of that party in power they do not make policies on matters affecting the masses, then कौन होगा in the process? They shall be rejected by the people. ସେମାନେ ଗୋଟେ popular vote ଆସିଛନ୍ତି, ସରକାର କରିଛନ୍ତି, କିନ୍ତୁ ସେମାନେ ଯଦି constantly ଲୋକମାନଙ୍କର ଆବଶ୍ୟକତାକୁ ଦୃଷ୍ଟିରେ ନ ରଖି public policy ତିଆରି କରିବେ, then ultimately what shall happen? They shall be overthrown. They shall be rejected by the people. So, public policy definitely is an integral part of democratic government. एठी लोकमानकर ओपिनियन विषय काहे हम बारंबार कहूचे। Think of a dictatorial regime. सेठी public opinion कौन रोल नहीं। Dictator जहाँ चाहिए वो सेया है वो। He shall impose its decision on the people. So the policy for the people are the policy of the ruler. Whatever he wants, he shall decide what is best for the people. सेठी हम बारंबार कहूचे democracy. जो थे लोकमानकर इच्छा एवं आस्था सबुठारु इम्पोर्टेंट। सो लेजिस्लेटिव प्रोसेस रे हमें जानि जे पॉलिसी तयारी होची। फॉर एग्जांपल इन आवर कंट्री पार्लियामेंट इज द सुप्रीम सिंबल ऑफ पीपल्स पार्टिसिपेशन एंड द पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज as a form of people's representation. The political parties and their views, they form the very basis of governance. But the people, those who are at the helm of affairs, those who are this has this responsibility of formulating public policy, जो माने कि लोकनीति की निर्धारण करुछंती, सेमने विभिन्न पुरा धरतु एनजीओ सोशल मूवमेंट्स आम जो प्रीवियस चैप्टर पढ़ले सोशल मूवमेंट्स कौन लोक मान गोटे ग्रीभांस गोटे डिस्कंटेटमेंट गोटे रिफ्लेक्शन तेणु सोशल मूवमेंट रो आउटपुट because it's a reflection of people's interest এবং এনজিও নন গভর্নমেন্ট অর্গানাইজেশনস ভলেন্টারি অ্যাকশন গ্রুপস सिविल सोसाइटी ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस एवढा कुछ वेरियस फोरम वेरियस फोरा जहाँ को मध्य पॉलिसी मेकर्स माने कांस्टेंट सेमानकर टच रे रहिल बिकॉज़ देयर ओपिनियन मैटर्स कारण सोसाइटी रो विभिन्न सेक्टर रो इंटरेस्ट को सेमाने रिप्रेजेंट करंती दे रिप्रेजेंट वेरियस
ଭଲ ଲାଗୁଛି ବେଲେ ମତେ ତମେ ଯେ ଖରାପ କହ
hello there is some disturbance please audio hello there is some noise coming so please switch off these noises hello so we shall find that media से भी बेसी important मीडिया माध्यम रे कांस्टेंटली पॉलिसी मेकर्स माने एनजीओ सिविल सोसाइटी ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस वेरियस मूवमेंट्स एनजीओस सेमान को टच रहती एवं दे कैन गेट द इंफॉर्मेशन दे कैन टेस्ट द पल्स ऑफ द पीपल लोक मानकर कोन इच्छा किबा गोटे पॉलिसी की सेमान ऑलरेडी तयारी करछंती से पॉलिसीटा लोक मान द्वारा एते आदृत हो नाही सपोज दैट पॉलिसी इज नॉट वेरी मच लाइक्ड बाय द पीपल तबे गवर्नमेंट पॉलिसी मेकर माने जानिबे केबी सो दैट दे कैन इंप्रूव अपन सो मीडिया प्लीज रिमेंबर इज वेरी इंपोर्टेंट इट इज अनदर इंस्टीट्यूशन व्हिच फैसिलिटेट्स the communication between the government and the people लोको एवं सरकार भितर communication channel होचंदी मीडिया it may be electronic media it may be print media whatever may be the channel in the early days the press and the politics have been closely there associated since the invention of the printing press कारण electronic media टा एबेसना आसला prior to this virtually we are depending on the print media dharantu newspapers the press बुर्जुआ आपण धरत यूरोपियन सोसाइटी की जीवा जो बुर्जुआ रिवोल्यूशन बहुत आगुरु प्रेस has emerged and it acquired significance during and after revolution बुर्जुआ रिवोल्यूशन पूर्व they have existed किंतु सेमानकर इंपोर्टेंस विषय रे लोक माने बुर्जुआ रिवोल्यूशन पर हे जानले the importance of the press the feudal system was overthrown to establish bourgeois democracy जो थे कि values like liberty equality and fraternity they have been cherished initial days manakare the task of the press was to consolidate the achievements of the emerging democracy जे गणतंत्र कोन कोन सुफल ताको प्रेस माध्यम रे लोकन पाखरे पहुंचे पाउथले एनु बुर्जुआ डेमोक्रेसी रो फ्रूट्स बा तार सफलता लोकन पाखरे पहुंचिया पई प्रेस गोटे गणमाध्यम थिला एवं वेरी इंपोर्टेंट एंड पावरफुल वेपन ड्यूरिंग द अर्ली डेज then with the advancement of time bourgeois democracies they have matured They realized that the process of democratizing the masses, it could not be accelerated. There cannot be any speed in that without allowing a more free press than what it was. You know, ପ୍ରେସଟାକୁ ଯଦି ଆମେ ଷ୍ଟିଫଲ କରିଦେବା, ଆମର ବିଭିନ୍ନ ସମୟରେ ହେଇକି ପ୍ରେସର ଫ୍ରିଡମ ଉପରେ ଗୁରୁତ୍ୱ ଦିଆଯାଏ। ଧରନ୍ତୁ ଏମର୍ଜେନ୍ସି ସମୟରେ ପ୍ରେସର ସ୍ୱାଧୀନତା ଉପରେ ଅଙ୍କୁଶ ଲଗା ହେଇଥିଲା। ତାର ଅର୍ଥ ଲୋକମାନଙ୍କର ଆଭିମୁଖ୍ୟ, ସେମାନଙ୍କର ରିଆକ୍ସନ୍ସ ଠିକ ସେ ଗଭର୍ଣ୍ଣମେଣ୍ଟ ପାଖରେ ପହଞ୍ଚୁ ନଥିଲା। ତେଣୁ ଡିକ୍ଟେଟୋରିଆଲ ରିଜିମ୍ ମାନେ ତ ପ୍ରେସକୁ ମୋଟେ ହିଁ ଆଲାଉ କରୁନଥିଲେ, ବିକଜ through that the people's grievance may be ventilated against them. କିନ୍ତୁ ଡେମୋକ୍ରାସିରେ ମିଡିଆର ରୋଲ ସେଇଥିପାଇଁ ସବୁବେଳେ ଇମ୍ପୋର୍ଟାଣ୍ଟ। ଇଟ୍ ଇଜ ଦ ପିପଲ୍ ହୁ ରୁଲ୍। ଆମେ ରିପ୍ରେଜେଣ୍ଟେଟିଭ ପଠାଉଛେ, କିନ୍ତୁ ଫାଇନାଲି who are backing those representatives, they are backed by the people, people's voice. And the decisions made by the people in the voting booths depend upon the information made available. ଆମେ ଯଦି ଗୋଟେ ସରକାର କ'ଣ କରୁଛନ୍ତି, କିପରି ନୀତି କରୁଛନ୍ତି, ତା ବିଷୟରେ ଆମେ ଯଦି ଇନଫର୍ମେସନ ଆଭେଲେବଲ ଲୋକମାନଙ୍କ ପାଖରେ ନାହିଁ, କିମ୍ବା ଟ୍ରଙ୍କେଟେଡ୍ ଇନଫର୍ମେସନ ଫ୍ରି ଫ୍ଲୋରେ ଗୋଟେ କରେକ୍ଟ ପିକ୍ଚର ଗଭର୍ଣ୍ଣମେଣ୍ଟର ଆକ୍ଟିଭିଟି ଉପରେ ଲୋକଙ୍କ ପାଖରେ ପହଞ୍ଚି ପାରୁନି, then they cannot do freely, they cannot decide freely. So remember, democracy is a free society, and in no other form of government citizens are that free. So common citizens have a great deal of exposure to the media. ତେଣୁ ମିଡିଆ ଥ୍ରୁ ଇନଫର୍ମେସନ ଯାଉଛି, ଭାରିୟସ୍ ଏଣ୍ଟରଟେନମେଣ୍ଟ ପ୍ରୋଗ୍ରାମସ ମାନେ ଯାଉଛି, ଇନଫର୍ମେସନ ଫ୍ଲୋ କରୁଛି, ଏବଂ ମିଡିଆ ଥିବାରୁ ଲୋକମାନେ ସବୁବେଳେ ଅପଡେଟେଡ ରହୁଛନ୍ତି। they are updated, and when the public is updated, he is vigilant, he is alert. So modern democracies, they have witnessed the complex and increasingly critical relationship between media and public policy. I think आपने बुझी पारुछन जे मीडिया रोल टा केते इंपोर्टेंट गोटे विशेष करी डेमोक्रेसी रे, जोटा कि लोकमानकर जनमत को शेप दबो एवं गोटे हेल्दी शेप दबो। तेणु जो माने मीडिया और पब्लिक पॉलिसी रो स्टूडेंट्स, they must, it is a virtually imperative on their part to know how these forces they collide in our modern media. And equally important is to examine how coverage decisions regarding public policies are made in newsrooms. With the advancement of technology, there is emergence of information technology. And you know, there is convergence of various communication technologies which have changed the nature of media. आगुरु हमें मीडिया माने प्रेस बोली भाबुतले, प्रिंट मीडिया को। Now it includes radio, television, computers, net. So the area has become wider. electronic media asla pare coverage area is wider, channels are more sophisticated. So definitely the role of computers and internet, it has become very important roles, and they have become also important in the day-to-day life of a citizen in a democracy. Now, with the governance and seemingly lack of control of the internet, the government and the people have a live channel for communication. And more interest groups, they are networking with other peoples of similar interest. So sometimes they also manipulate on certain issues. So it may be ego, print media, it may be e-governance, it may be the old methods of communication, doesn't matter. But media shapes the public opinion. ଏଥିରେ କୌଣସି ଦ୍ୱିମତ ନାହିଁ. Of course, there are many studies which have expounded that media not only is the only agent of shaping the people's perception. Ọନେକ researchers found that mass media had no direct influence in decision making of the people. And some scholars, they described the interpersonal relationship, peer group pressures, and opinion leaders as some of the major factors for shaping the public opinion. Kichi scholar କହୁଛନ୍ତି directly ଗୋଟେ common man public policy making की influence କରିପାରୁନି. Rather there are intermediary bodies, peer groups ରହିଛନ୍ତି, opinion leaders ରହିଛନ୍ତି, ଯୋଉମାନେ କି public opinion को shape କରିବାରେ ବେଶୀ ସହାୟକ ହଉଛନ୍ତି. ବିଶେଷ କରି US election, presidential election 1940 ରେ few scholars like Paul Lazarsfeld, they have conducted the research like this, that mass media ର role ଟା ବହୁତ କମ. Public common masses ମାନଙ୍କର access to the policy making bastions, they are limited. 1970s ରେ 1970 ଦଶକରେ the communication theorists, they again emphasized the role of media in molding the public perception. Some references can be made, for example, George Gardner's cultivation theory, ଯୋଉଥିରେ କି ସେ ବର୍ଣ୍ଣନା କରିଛନ୍ତି ଯେ media ହେଉଛି ଗୋଟେ societyର molder, it is the molder of the society, it can shape and reshape the society. And he believed that. Hello, there is some noise, please mute yourself. Please mute, there is some noise disturbance. So, single. Hello, please mute. There is some noise coming from some car. So, George Gardner believed that mass media has subtle effects on people's perception. As he described the media as cultivators of dominant image patterns. ସେଥିପାଇଁ ଗୋଟେ cultivation theory ବୋଲି କୁହାଯାଏ. They cultivate the dominant image patterns. And also, later on, the media and politics relationship, they are also investigated, analyzed by many other scholars like Maxwell, Malcolm, Donald Shaw in 1972. Those explored the role the media played in the agenda setting during the election time. Election time रे आपण देखिबे ई opinion makers, various media, various communication channels, they become active. There are also many alternative theories of mass media. Melvin D. Floor and Sandra Ball-Roquia proposed the dependency theory. Another theory important, dependency theory, in which certain social and psychological factors prevent media from exercising control over their audiences. एथरे स्कॉलर माने से माने तंकर एनालिसिस कहउछन जे केते बडे साइकोलॉजिकल फैक्टर्स अछि बा केते सोशल फैक्टर्स मध्ये अछि जोटा कि गोटे मास मीडिया को प्रिवेंट करछि तार ऑडियंस को ऊपर प्रभाव विस्तार करिया पे. So there are certain factors which obstacle. So they say that mass media not only lack arbitrary influence powers, but also their personally lack of freedom to engage in arbitrary communication behavior. Arbitrarily से गोटे ऑडियंस को इन्फ्लुएंस करि परिबेनी किछि सोशल साइकोलॉजिकल फैक्टर्स मध्ये रहिछि जोटा कि तांकर इन्फ्लुएंसिंग पावर ऊपर लिमिटेशन बा रेस्ट्रिक्शन दउछि. So this is dependency theory. तार माने कोन जे मास मीडिया रो इफेक्टिवनेस किछि किछि फैक्टर ऊपर डिपेंड करूछि. डिपेंडेंसी थ्योरी रो अर्थ से आ गोटे मध्ये थ्योरी अछि which is called the development communication theory, which was formulated during the efforts of McBride Commission. And the task of that commission was to study communication problems of developing societies. Developing society a communication problem ba media man au taker audience ba mass bhitere jo communication channel तारी पर से से commission McBride Commission was conducting the study. The absence of communication infrastructure, the dependence on the developed world for hardware and software, there are some of the problems in this field of communication. And the major concern of this development communication theories was to find the means to use media for development programs like poverty alleviation, population control. Because democratic government माने 8 प्रकार populist measures मान नियंत्रित like poverty development programs pursued by them, poverty alleviation, population control, literacy drive, employment generation, etc. But the development communication finds certain problems in this, in employing the means to use this media for development programs. So there are various theories like this which have been developed so far as media and development process is concerned, like dependency theory, cultivation theory, mass, then the development communication theory. So this is more or less a broad description about the media and development process in the democratic societies. You can find from your texts various case studies which we need not go for details, like for example in Delhi government this study has been conducted on the public mission CNG, because recently Delhi government on the orders of Supreme Court decided to introduce CNG, because CNG is an environmentally friendly fuel in order to reduce the air pollution in the metropolitan capital of the country. Because city environmental pollution, air pollution एते अधिक है जे CNG उरे गुरुत्व दिया गला. Because that is more environment friendly, less pollutant. So the public policy on CNG can form a case study for you. So, so far as this CNG case study is concerned, media has reported this problem, environmental problem, on almost every stage of the implementation of this policy. No, दिल्ली सरकार CNG ଉପରେ ଯେତେବେଳେ ଯୋଉ ପଲିସି ଗୁଡାକ ହେଇଛି ତାକୁ ମିଡିଆ ଲୋକମାନଙ୍କ ସମ୍ମୁଖକୁ ଆଣିଛି. For example, Times News Network, that headline, polluted Delhi wants CNG. CSC helps SC judgment. CNG issue leaves cabinet a divided house. It was in April 2002. तामाने विभिन्न समय रे न्यूज़ पेपर रो बा विभिन्न मीडिया रो जो इन्फॉर्मेशन लोक मान पाको दिया जायछि तार गुटे क्लिपिंग गुडा को इट हैज कम अप. फॉर एग्जांपल, एक्सप्रेस न्यूज़ सर्विस अप्रैल 8 तारिख 2002 रे गुटे न्यूज़ देला लोक मान को सेंटर इज ट्राइंग टू यूसर कोर्ट्स पावर एक्सपर्ट्स. तामाने विभिन्न समय रे प्रेस रो हेडलाइन सीएनजी पॉलिसी दिल्ली सरकार द्वारा हेतला, it has hit the headlines. So this is a case study. So the extracts from the few press releases which highlight the issue of air pollution and various political and business interests involving in supporting or opposing the use of CNG. तामाने press actively roll कला जे policy रो impact उपरे. What is the stand of the government taken on this air pollution and what are the measures that's taken to reduce it? So this is one of the case studies and the press clippings which highlights the nature of the public policy debate. तमने गोटे इश्यू को लोकमान का समग्र हाईलाइट करा गला এবং তারপরে পাবলিক ডিবেটটাকে अलाउ करा गला. It is possible because of the media. And there can be also conflicting parties who can oppose the policy. So some examples are also given that the conflicting parties in this debate CNG case of Delhi were the diesel vehicle manufacturers. You know, semane CNG implementation ta se samare oppose करथले. Delhi transporters, civil societies movement of clean air principles. These are the various groups those who have conflicting views on this. So this is just a case study. Likewise, in the democracy, there are numerous case studies that where the media can bring the most important points of the issue before the public, solicit their opinion, which can be written as the feedback for the policy makers, so that the policy can be modified, changed, or can be continued in the light of the public opinion expressed through media. So, public policy is an integral part of the development process. Press may not generally report the development issues, but it does intervene in case of a conflict views on development reports, as the case study of CNG in Delhi. We have very brief reference to that. Then with the idea on public policy and the role of media in the formulation of public policy, we shall go for the next unit, that what type of role the interest groups play in policy making. You know, there are various interest groups, pressure groups, which are operating in a democratic society. And the decade of 1960s demonstrated that democracy was not functioning through individuals, but through various interest groups. 1960 ଦଶକରେ studies have revealed ଯେ ଗଣତନ୍ତ୍ର ବ୍ୟକ୍ତି ମାନଙ୍କ ଦ୍ୱାରା ପରିଚାଳିତ ହେଉନାହିଁ. It is managed through various interest groups. ଅନେକ ସ୍ୱାର୍ଥ ଗୋଷ୍ଠୀ ଯେଉଁମାନେ କି ସୋସାଇଟିର ବିଭିନ୍ନ ଇଣ୍ଟରେଷ୍ଟକୁ ପ୍ରମୋଟ କରନ୍ତି ତାଙ୍କ ଦ୍ୱାରା ପରିଚାଳିତ ହେଉଛି. And the first development decade declared by United Nations in 1960s, it demonstrated the expanding politics of foreign aid and of the democratic ideals of freedom, rights and need of the political participation. So, interest groups and political parties ଭିତରେ ଯଦି ଗୋଟେ close relationship ରହିଛି, but they are essentially friend. We can, if we discuss the characteristics of interest groups, their density, their representational domain, it can be made clear that how interest groups are different from the political parties, but yet they are more prominent because the political parties dance to the tunes of the pressure groups. स्वार्थ गोष्ठी की बात देकर पॉलिटिकल पार्टी माने डेमोक्रेसी से तिष्ठी पारिबे नहीं. आमे तंकर basis of the numbers, we can classify interest groups into small interest groups, medium interest groups, and large interest groups. So, depending on its size and number, there can be three categories of interest groups. And again, another basis also can be their political constituency, privileged, intermediate, and latent. In a privileged group, one member who gains enough privately from the public good to be willing to supply it on its own if necessary. किंतु एक प्रकार ग्रुप देखा गले very small in number. It is also constituted of any industry sector मानकर मध्य industrial interest groups मान रही which benefits from the tariff like Reliance or a trade union. So these are also various interest groups. Think of a trade union. It's not a political party. I mean, previous chapter में करे धरंतु AITUC, मजदूर किसान संघर्ष समिति, Sugar Mill Owners Association. These are not political parties, but they are definitely interest groups because they represent the interest of a particular section of the society. The intermediate groups is not privileged, but sustain its collective action on basis of mutual watchfulness over each other's behavior, such as the Teachers Association, which is again divided like elementary, higher secondary school levels to the college and university level teachers association. And again, the third type of industry group is also neither privileged group nor intermediate. And observers say that that is more or less non-existent. ତେଣୁ ସେମାନଙ୍କୁ ଅନେକ ସ୍କଲାର କହନ୍ତି ଲାଟେଣ୍ଟ, ତାମାନେ ପ୍ରାୟ ସେମାନେ ନନ୍ ଏକ୍ଜିଷ୍ଟେଣ୍ଟ. So some scholars term them as latent. ଆପଣ ଦେଖନ୍ତୁ ଲାଟେଣ୍ଟ ର ଅର୍ଥ କ'ଣ? ଯୋଉଟା ଲୁକାୟିତ ହୋଇକି ଅଛନ୍ତି. Suppose fire, we can see it. Steam, steam ରେ ଆମେ ହାତ ଦେଇଦେଲେ ଆମେ ତାଟା ପାଉଛେ, କିନ୍ତୁ fire is not seen, it's latent. ତାକୁ କ'ଣ କୁହାଯାଉଛି? ଆପଣଙ୍କ ସାଇନ୍ସ ଯୋଉମାନଙ୍କ ବେସିକ୍ ଆଇଡିଆସ୍, latent heat. ସେମିତି ଯୋଉମାନେ ପ୍ରିଭିଲେଜ ଗ୍ରୁପ୍ସ ନୁହନ୍ତି କିମ୍ବା ଇଣ୍ଟରମିଡିଏଟ୍ ଗ୍ରୁପ୍ସ ନୁହନ୍ତି, ତାଙ୍କୁ କିଛି କିଛି ସ୍କଲାର କହନ୍ତି they are more or less non-existent, and scholars like Olson prefers to call them latent. ସେମାନେ ଲୁକାୟିତ ଭାବରେ ସୋସାଇଟିରେ ଅପରେଟ୍ କରୁଛନ୍ତି. And sometimes this may include the unemployed group of the people, consumer associations, even some people say senior citizens group like Age Care, Helpage India. So these are various types of interest groups. How are they different from political parties? So ସବୁଠାରୁ ବେସିକ୍ ଡିଫରେନ୍ସ ହେଉଛି ଯେ ପଲିଟିକାଲ ପାର୍ଟିଜ ମାନେ openly they contest for political power, they contest elections, but the pressure groups, they never contest election, but they have tremendous influence on political parties. They are like string pullers. ତେଣୁ ପର୍ଦ୍ଦା ଆଢୁଆଳରେ ରହି ସେମାନେ ତାଙ୍କର ଡୋମିନାଣ୍ଟ ରୋଲକୁ ପ୍ଲେ କରନ୍ତି. ଆମେ ପଲିଟିକାଲ ପାର୍ଟି ବିଷୟରେ ଆପଣମାନେ ଅଳ୍ପ ବହୁତ ଜାଣନ୍ତି. The functions which they play are interest articulation, structure the vote, integrate and mobilize the mass public, they include political leaders. Political parties also organize government, they formulate public policy, they also have a very important role in interest aggregation. So these are the important functions which the political parties they play. And you know, starting in the 1970s but becoming more apparent in the 1980s was the system in the main task of mobilization. So in the post-independent phase of developing countries, parties were not able to resonate the people's aspirations, and they're proving to be an alienated and disarticulated group of citizens. So MacLean, one other scholar, has mentioned one factor that which has led to the weakening of the party agenda. That why party agenda has been weakened. This is the winning of the party agenda is due to merging of the political idealism with the social activity. In earlier times, party organization provided a good meeting, socializing opportunity to the party workers and like-minded people. But with the rise of alternative recreational means coupled with the increase of affluence, richness, and shortest work hours, parties were unable to provide for the kind of freedom which its members wanted. So naturally, parties gradually has a waning importance. And some scholars also they have pointed out that the campaign for nuclear disarmament as an example of the change occurring in this society, which widely displaced the rigid party loyalty amongst the workers. And gradually party loyalty dhire dhire, because of many reasons it has waned. Political parties found themselves naturally more ostracized. They found themselves constrained, restricted, particularly after 1960s. Because this is because constituency गुड़ाक निर्वाचन मंडल गुड़ाक धीरे धीरे स्पेशल इंटरेस्ट ग्रुप मान द्वारा कैप्चर है स्वार्थ गोष्ठी माने सेति बेसी डोमिनेंट रोल नेले इश्यूज गुड़ाक पार्टीज रो प्लेटफॉर्म रो ओरिजिनेट न करी धीरे धीरे इंटरेस्ट ग्रुप को प्लेटफॉर्म धीरे धीरे ओरिजिनेट कला the issues were sparked by the interest groups. Even very interestingly, interest group man agro political party ki follow करथिले, but then political parties they had to follow the interest groups. एवं सेमानकर सपोर्ट रे सेमानकर कैंपेन बा पॉलिटिकल विक्ट्री का डिपेंड करथला. You see the reverse trend. So now parties found themselves as followers of interest groups. It's a very interesting study. So there is fear among the scholars. जोटा कि आगुरु पॉलिटिकल पार्टी लोकों के पास क्लोज है कि थिला, so that they can contest for power, they can come to power with their support. There is a fear among the scholars that the party is being distanced from the public. लोगों को पाकु धीरे धीरे दूर ही जाऊँ. Thus, the greatest fear for democracy comes from the fact that political parties are central to the development and expansion of democratic consolidation, but which may now not be in a position to represent the aspirations of the people. Why this fear? Because some scholars have analyzed in the present day political parties are not in a position to represent the aspirations of the people. See, लोकमानकर आकांक्षा बा आशा को ठीक ढंग से रिप्रेजेंटेशन दे पारु नाहंती. So this very relationship between the interest groups and democracy, the role of political parties and interest groups, they constitute the core dilemma of the debate on governance. Definitely, all the actors should have their successful role and assigned role for a successful democracy. And the solution to this problem of democratization, it lies in the creation of a set of institutions which should have been agreed upon both by the citizens and political parties. Definitely, there has been an increase in the weighing importance or decline in significance of the role of political parties in mobilizing the masses, in the field of interest articulation. There are interest articulation that basic interest group मान को द्वारा परिचालित होती. It has become more associated with the professional groups. And the inability of the political parties to divert attention from their petty regional, personal political issues to the development of poverty, eradication, or rise of new corporatism and cause groups with single issues in Western Europe are all partly responsible for this. Because now the party leaders are more, they have become more myopic. They're more associated with their own interest, own image building. So issues of development, they're no more bothered about issues of development like poverty alleviation or eradication of illiteracy like that. But one thing is that in the beginning we have made it clear that interest groups, they're interest groups, they represent various interests of the society. And the political parties, they could draw the necessary support from them. Because if the interest group is quite large and very strong, then they can say, they can have a bargaining power over the political party that if we vote for you, if we can make necessary public opinion in support of you and you shall come power, you must agree to protect our interest. Interest group अर्थ कौन ସେମାନେ ତାଙ୍କର ନିଜ ନିଜର ଇଣ୍ଟରେଷ୍ଟକୁ ପ୍ରୋଟେକ୍ଟ କରିବା ପାଇଁ ପଲିଟିକାଲ ପାର୍ଟିକୁ ବ୍ୟବହାର କରନ୍ତି. କିନ୍ତୁ ସେମାନେ କେବଳ ତାଙ୍କର ନିଜର କ୍ୟାଣ୍ଡିଡେଟକୁ ଇଲେକ୍ସନରେ ଫିଲ୍ଡ କରନ୍ତି ନାହିଁ. ସେମାନଙ୍କ ରୋଲଟା ସବୁବେଳେ ବିହାଇଣ୍ଡ ଦ ସ୍କ୍ରିନ୍, ପର୍ଦ୍ଦା ଆଢୁଆଳରେ ରହି ସରକାରଙ୍କ ଉପରେ ଚାପ କରିବା ବା ପ୍ରେସର ବିଲ୍ଡ କରିବାର କାମ ହେଉଛି ସେମାନଙ୍କର. So interest groups, pressure groups, they lobby on government on various issues to safeguard their own interest. Jadio there is a greater fear that political parties are getting distanced from the people. One, not lost their representative character. Democracy is still accepted structure housing political parties. They still continue to be accepted structures. Election asila mane it is the political parties who shall galvanize support of the public, whatever may be the means. And interest groups cannot aggregate interests as broadly across social groups and political issues as the political parties can. So jadio semanଙ୍କର importance धीरे धीरे कमी जाउची, and also they sometimes identify themselves with narrow interests, regional interests, interpersonal squabbles. Still they are accepted structures in a democracy because they will field candidates, they shall contest for power, and they shall constitute the government. ସେମାନେ finally ସରକାର କରିବେ. It is not the interest groups. So in a democracy, particularly under no circumstances, we cannot say that they have become insignificant or they have become unimportant. No. So this is, we have discussed broadly media and democracy, media and development, then also interest groups and their relationship with democracy. Then the next unit shall be devoted for identity politics in India. Parichaya Rajaniti, identity. Because society faces identity crisis. Parichaya Sambalito Samasya. The present day society is there because the society is highly complex. ଏବଂ ଆପଣମାନଙ୍କର ଟେକ୍ସଟରେ ବିଶେଷ କରି ଆଇଡେଣ୍ଟିଟି ପଲିଟିକ୍ସ ବେସ୍ଡ ଅନ୍ କାଷ୍ଟ, ରିଲିଜନ, ଲାଙ୍ଗୁଏଜ, ଏଥନିସିଟି, ଏଇ ବେସିସ୍ ଗୁଡାକୁ ନେଇକରି ଆମେ ଡିସ୍କସ୍ କରିବା। ଧର ଜଣଙ୍କର ପରିଚୟ, କାଷ୍ଟ ଇଜ ଆଇଡେଣ୍ଟିଟି। somebody is a Brahmin, somebody is a Shudra, somebody is a Kshatriya, this is caste identity. Religion, somebody is a Hindu, somebody is a Muslim, somebody is a Sikh, this is a religious identity. Language, somebody is speaking Odia, somebody is speaking Tamil, somebody is speaking Telugu, this identity on the basis of language. Then ethnicity, that is racial. For example, the races, Karbi Angle, Bodos, this is an example of ethnicity, mostly more or less racial identity. Indian politics, because it's a multilingual, multi-religious, multicultural society. Indian society is, in our society, identity politics has become a very prominent subject. Particularly past few years, ଆମେ ଗଣତନ୍ତ୍ର ଯେତିକି ଆଗଉଛେ ଏଇ ଇସ୍ୟୁ ଗୁଡାକ ସେତିକି ପ୍ରମିନେଣ୍ଟ ହଉଛି। In some of the classes I have told you, ଗୋଟେ ସମୟ ଥିଲା ancient society ରେ caste was pure social unit। ଗୋଟେ example କୁ କୁହାହଉଛି, ଜାତି ପ୍ରଥା ଗୋଟେ ସମ୍ପୂର୍ଣ୍ଣ ଭାବରେ ଗୋଟେ ସାମାଜିକ ବ୍ୟବସ୍ଥା ଥିଲା। But what about today's experience? Caste politics has become most dominant. Political parties, they appeal to various caste groups to galvanize support, to collect votes. Simply religion was purely one emotive force, a private affair. But now communal issues has become very prominent. Communal tensions have become rampant in the society. Various linguistic groups, ethnic conflicts, they have also contributed greatly to the significance of identity politics in India. So, the basic question is, how do the discourses on identity fit into political landscape? What are the political underpinnings of these discourses on identity? What are the organizing principles of movements? The basic question, for example, can we define movements of workers or peasants as an example of identity politics? So, these are the basic questions and issues involved in the politics of identity in the present India. It is said to signify a whole range of political activity and theorizing founded in the shared experiences of injustice of members of certain social groups. Identity politics to basically अनेक कहिसंती that it signifies a wide range of political activity and theorizing which are based in the shared experiences of injustice of members of a certain social group. आम धर कहबा think in terms of the Dalit movement, a section of the society that are facing injustice. That is why they have come up with demands for justice for them. That means the members of that particular group, they have a shared experience of injustice. সেই গ্রুপর লোকମାନେ ସମସ୍ତେ ଫିଲ୍ କରୁଛନ୍ତି ଯେ ଆମକୁ ପ୍ରପର ନ୍ୟାୟ ଦିଆଯାଏ ନାହିଁ. So this feeling has united them and this has led to identity politics. ତେଣୁ ଯେକୌଣସି ଗୋଟେ social group based on caste ହଉ, religion ହଉ, language ହଉ, ethnicity ହଉ, ସେଇ members ମାନେ ସେଇ social group ର they have shared experience of injustice. So as a political activity, identity politics is thus considered to signify a body of political objects which attempts a recovery from exclusion and denigration. एपर्यंत समाज जो अवहेलित कर रखा है, डेनिग्रेटेड कर रखा है, से गोटे रिकवरी गोटे सो वर्चुअली जमी गोटे एक्सक्लूसिव ग्रुप हिसाब से ट्रीट करा से अब्याहति पाइबा they move forward with movements because they feel that hitherto they are marginalized. So identity politics attempts to attain empowerment, representation and recognition of social groups by asserting the very same markers which distinguish and differentiate them from others. What is the criticism against this identity politics? The strongest criticism against this identity politics is that it often challenged the very same markers upon which the sense of self or community is sought to be built. So identity politics as a field of study can be said to have gained intellectual legitimacy since the second half of the 20th century. 1950 दशक आ 1960 दशक भितर ये आइडेंटिटी पॉलिटिक्स का प्रोमिनेंस को आसिला. For example, in the United States, there are large-scale political movements like second wave feminism, black civil rights movement, gay and lesbian liberation movements. So there are various indigenous groups, those who have also come forward with movements in the United States and other parts of the world. So identity politics is not confined to India alone. United States, the feminist movement, black movement, civil rights movements, they have come up. Feminism, for example, Mary Wollstonecraft and other feminist leaders, they have come up with slogans and writings for the liberation of women. That identity of the women must be established. So it has become worldwide phenomenon. Black rights, civil rights, black लोक माने मध्य यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स सेमानकर आइडेंटिटी बा परिचय राजनीति निजर परिचय को साब्यस्त करबा पे विभिन्न टेक्निक्स स्ट्रेटजीज दे हैव फॉलोड. In India, we find जे आमे लिबराल डेमोक्रेसी ହେଇଛି आफ्टर इंडिपेंडेंस हमर प्रिएमल बा न्यूयॉर्क कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन भितर अनेक राइट्स विषय मध्ये कुहाइछि स्टिल देन कलेक्टिव आइडेंटिटीज एंड एवं सेमाने इंडिपेंडेंट इंडिया मध्ये तांकर रिकॉग्निशन पई बा सेमानकर परिस्थिति पई मध्ये आंदोलन जारी रखसंती So one sociologist Bethel, he has argued that Indian polity has consistently tried to negotiate the allegiance to liberal spirit and the concerns and consciousness of the community. Bhikkhu Parikh also said that this process has recognized a wide array of autonomous and largely self-governing communities. So, in the post-independent state of India, there is a claim for granting of recognition to the particular identities. So we find identity politics of various issues which has come up in our country, and the most spectacular are those based on language, religion, caste, ethnicity, and mostly ethnicity is related to tribal identity. Carving amongst the Bodos, or the identity politics of the Garos, Jaintiyas, Garo Khasi Jaintiyas in Meghalaya. So caste, very briefly we shall throw some light on the different bases. What about the caste-based discrimination? कारण हमरो एंशिएंट इंडिया रे caste structure thila, caste hierarchy, varnashram, and there is a brahminical dominance, and some say that thus members of the society, those who are not included in this varnashram system, in the caste structure, they are treated to be outcasts, untouchables, who are known to be Dalits in the latter age. And this is a pernicious feature of Indian society in post-independence period. So they have the downtrodden, so far the caste is concerned. They have consistently tried for their identity to justify, to be established. So at various points of time, the demands, they include the policy of reservation, or say protective discrimination to remove untouchability as an institution from Indian social life. So the role of Ambedkar is very important, who has tried for the betterment of this low caste people, the untouchables, and sufficient also provisions, constitutional provisions have been included for the betterment of these people. Think of Model Commission. It can also consider the intellectual inspiration in transforming caste-based identity to an asset which can be used for political and economic gains. And you know, the caste system, which is based on the ideas of purity and pollution, hierarchy and difference, it has, despite social mobility, been oppressive towards the Sudras and the outcasts. and they have suffered a lot because of the stigma of ritual impurity. So there's abject poverty, illiteracy, there is denial of political power, social dignity. So whatever it may be, caste has become an important determinant in Indian society and politics. So with the advancement of democracy, various political parties that draw their support from this caste-based politics. There are also Dalit organizations. Imagine, for example, Bahujan Samaj Party purely is based on the Dalit politics, the support from the Dalits. The net effect of the mobilization along the caste identities, they have resulted not only in the empowerment of the newly emerging groups, but has increased the intensity of confrontational politics between various castes. So sometimes this caste politics is also leading to the crisis of governability. ବେଳେବେଳେ ଶାସନରେ ବା ଶାସନ ପ୍ରଣାଳୀରେ ଶଙ୍କ ମଧ୍ୟ ଏହା ସୃଷ୍ଟି କରେ. So we shall find that caste, the movements or the relationship between the caste and politics, it has assumed so much of stupendous, dimensions, or serious dimensions that it has posed great dangers for governance, sometimes leading to crisis of governability. Then think of religion. It leads to communal politics. So this is also another form of identity politics. There are various loyalists, Hindu loyalists, Muslim loyalists, Sikh loyalists, groups. References also can be made to Hinduism, Sikhism, Christianity, Zoroastrianism, Islam, which are the major religions practiced in our country. And numerically, Hindus considered to be majority. And this has inspired many Hindu loyalist groups like Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangha, Shiv Sena, and also political parties like BJP, Hindu Mahasabha, and also there are also many groups coming up or built by the loyalists to Sikhism or to Muslim Islam, to Christianity. So in post-independence India, the majoritarian assertion has generated its own antithesis in the form of minority religions assertiveness. So minority religions, because Hindu is the majority religion, they have gone for assertiveness, resulting in confrontational politics. So naturally, it creates a lot of discord in the civil society of India. Historically, the Hindu revivalist movement of the 19th century is considered to be the period that which saw the demarcation of two separate cultures of religious basis, the Hindus and the Muslims, which deepened further because of the partition. And this division has assumed the form of communal ideology. And it has become the major challenge for the secular character of Indian polity. So communal violence also rose at different periods of time in Indian society, creating the crisis again of governability. Big problems before the governance. Then identity based on language. You know, there's a language commission. You must be knowing about three language formula. And mostly the States Reorganization Commission, they have also gone for a very sound principle, linguistic principle, because most of the states, they are based on language issue. Language as one issue, it has its origin in also after independence. Amaro Puradino Bharatar, this was very much prominent. It was prominent also in the politics of the Congress, which had promised reorganization of the states in the post-independent period on linguistic basis. But it was Jawaharlal Nehru, Vallabhbhai Patel, and Pattabhi Sitaramaya, usually known as JVP committee, concession that if public sentiment was insistent and overwhelming, the formation of Andhra from the Telugu-speaking region of the Madras would be considered, which, as Michael Bresser mentioned, was the opening ways for the bitter struggle over states reorganization, which was to dominate Indian politics from 1953 to 1956. So, ironically, the claim of separate states for linguistic collectivities, it did not end in 1956. Even today, it continues to confront the concerns of the Indian leaders. Now, why this linguistic problem has been complicated? Because of the lack of a uniform language policy for the entire country. So it is generally felt that linguistic states provide freedom and autonomy for the collectivities within a heterogeneous society. Critics have argued that linguistic states have reinforced regionalism. It has proved a platform for the articulation of a large number of identity claims in the country, and as many as 1,652 mother tongues they're in use, they've been practiced, but only 14 languages have been recognized, around which states have been reorganized by that time. So naturally, many linguistic groups that feel disappointed. Of course, you must be knowing a little about the three language formula to settle the language issue. that is the regional language, English, and also Hindi as the national language. They have been adopted in order to settle most of the problems related to language. So even though the language issues they have existed prior to independence, even after so many years of freedom, language still continues to be one of the burning issues in our country, where many linguistic groups they are coming up with their own demands and movements and pressurizing the government to fulfill their claims and demands. Because this caste, religion, language, ethnicity, these are more or less emotive factors. Sometimes they are attributed to sentiment, and that is the reason that why sometimes they come up to the surface prominently with sometimes violence. Confrontational attitude among various communal groups, among various caste groups, among various linguistic groups. They have visited our Indian politics several times in different times. And there are also the problems of ethnicity. There are two ways in which the concept of ethnicity or ethnic identity is used. One, the formation of identity on the basis of single attributes like language, religion, caste, region, etc. And two, it considers the formation of identity on the basis of multiple attributes. But however, the basis which consider the formation of identity on multiple factors like or multiple attributes on the basis of more than one characters like culture, custom, region, religion, or caste, which has become most common by the formation of ethnic identity. Ethnic movement गुड़ाक आपने देखिए कि multiple factors द्वारा मतलब धीरे-धीरे they have been supported. Maybe that the religious attributes, they constitute a common race, speak a common language, they are from a common culture, they are also inhabiting a particular compact region. Our ethnic tribe, most often it is related to the tribal movements. Among Indian context, more or less they are prominent in the northeastern regions. It may be Modo movement, it may be Garo, Khasi, Jaintiyas and all that. So ethnic identity is naturally the politics of ethnic identity. It is still one burning issue. So the one ethnic identity is formed in relation to another ethnic identity. And the relations between more than one ethnic identities can be both harmonious or it may be also conflictual. They may be in harmony with each other or they may be conflicting with each other. So one ethnic identity may in confrontation with the other ethnic identity or also it can be also harmonious. They can also move in harmony with each other. So when there is competition among ethnic identities on the real or imaginary basis, it expressed in the form of autonomy movements. अनेक समय ethnic identities वा ଗୋଟେ ନିର୍ଦ୍ଦିଷ୍ଟ ethnic group ଲୋକମାନେ autonomous movement କରିଥାନ୍ତି. They want one autonomous region. Sometimes also in a very violent form. It results in secessionist movements. बेले बेले ସେମାନେ ଗୋଟେ ବିଚ୍ଛିନ୍ନତାବାଦୀ attitude ମଧ୍ୟ ବେଲେ ବେଲେ ନେଇ ପାରନ୍ତି. So the ethnic movements they expressed in the form of autonomy movements, demand for secession. Secession of thought to separate from the main land and all that. Sometimes it may take that form. It can also take the form of ethnic riots. Whatever it may be, ethnic identities based on caste, religion, language, and ethnicity. They have become important phenomena in the Indian politics. So, the identification of a member of the group on the basis of the shared common attributes like language, gender, religion, culture, ethnicity. As some of the attributes. And the mobilization on the basis of the markers usually is called identity politics. In India, we have seen Dalit politics, especially the Bahujan Samaj Party and backward class politics, following the implementation of the Mandal Commission report, the linguistic organization of Indian states from 1950s, and the rise of BJP and other active role of organizations like RSS, and the ethnic conflict and insurgencies, autonomous movements in several parts of the country, which are coming under this study of ethnic politics in India. And the democratic political system has enabled these groups to organize themselves and assert themselves on the basis of these common attributes, maybe religion, language, ethnicity, etc. So they both have their positive impact, positive role, and also they have their adverse roles so far as greater national interest in terms of unity and national unity and integrity is concerned. Let us come to another chapter, another unit, which constitutes also important subjects of Indian politics, that is on civil societies. So within another half an hour, let us say, we can cover up that. These are the social movements, non-government organizations, and voluntary action groups. In this chapter also we shall get to know about the new social movements and how these new social movements act as the agents of radical democracy. ଆମେ ଦେଖିବା ଏଇ କିଛି ଦଶକ କିଛି ବର୍ଷ ହେଲା there is a total rethinking of the development strategies. And this second thoughts, the rethinking, they are being influenced by the socio-economic problems, both in the rural sectors and urban sectors. Historically, ଆମେ ଦେଖିବାକୁ ଗଲେ social movements ଗୁଡାକ କେବଳ ଯେ modern India ରେ ହେଇଛି ସେୟା ନୁହେଁ. They have emerged also in the pre-independent India. But there is the emergence of the new social movements in the post-Indian society. And there is a resurgence of the category of the civil society, the coming up of the civil society in response to the experiential development and also sometimes there is the eclipse or decline of the civil society because of the emerging power of the state. So state versus the civil society has become a very important issue. Civil society, Nagaric Samaj, which has played a very prominent role in the present day democratic and development process. ଅନେକ theorists ତାଙ୍କର analysis ରେ କହିଛନ୍ତି the emergence of the civil society is caused by the breakup of the socialist regimes of Russia and Eastern Europe and the revival of the Tocquevillian tradition of celebrating the associational pluralism in United States. So some scholars observe that the Soviet type of experience they have failed because of the absence of civil society in such a state. Karan aapne janti, it may be communistic state or it may be fascist state. They are totalitarian states. So virtually there is the absence of civil society. नागरिक समाजर अनुपस्थिति in the Soviet societies. गोटे totalitarian setup रे civil society virtually is non-existent. Soviet type of experiment, it has failed because there is absence of civil society. तेणु civil society गोटे liberal democracy रो गोटे लक्षण, गोटे उदारवादी गणतंत्र रो गोटे परिचायक. The concept of civil society has a very interesting history. You know, it has always been a part of liberal democratic theories. Liberalists माने civil society की define करिसेंती as a sphere of independence but to be protected by the state, wherein the rights-bearing individuals are free to pursue their private interests in free associations with others. In civil society के हम देखिबा जोथरे individuals are free to form their associations to safeguard their own private interests. But one thing is they are also side by side protected by the state. Please remember, they are protected by the state, but still they pursue their own interest. They protect their own interest. But this type of definition reduces the civil society to that of a free market or free economy. तो परवर्ती पर्याय ये जो लिबरल थिंकर्स मानकर फॉर एग्जांपल जॉन स्टुअर्ट मिल, एलेक्स डी टॉकेविल, they have imagined of a civil society as a domain of social associations which would check the excess of the state. Tocqueville कहतु बा liberal thinkers like John Stuart Mill कहंतु से माने civil society अर्थ कहउचंती इज ए सोशल एसोसिएशन जोटा कि स्टेट रो एक्सेस को चेक करिवो स्टेट पावर ऊपर गोटे पाबंदी दबो so they are more concerned about the growing power of the state and they held the view that without active social associations the democracy also can degenerate to despotism ତେଣୁ social association ମାନେ ଯଦି strengthened ହେବେନି ବା conscious ହେବେନି ବା ସେମାନଙ୍କର prominent role ରହିବନି ତେବେ ଗଣତନ୍ତ୍ର ମଧ୍ୟ ଗୋଟେ ପ୍ରକାର ଦମନକାରୀ ରେଜିମ୍ ଗୋଟେ ଡେସ୍ପୋଟିକ୍ ରେଜିମ୍ ରେ ମଧ୍ୟ ରିଡ୍ୟୁସ୍ କରିବ democracy also can go berserk. So this is the concept given by the liberal theorists like Tocqueville and John Stuart Mill. Early Marxist literature रे civil society अन्य प्रकार मध्ये कहैछि that civil society plays a facilitating role for the functioning of the capitalist economy, delimiting the scope of civil society too much. ना हमें जदि मार्क्सिस्ट लिटरेचर कहते हमें जदि सिविल सोसाइटी बा नागरिक समाज को बेसी रेस्ट्रिक्ट कर दबा तबे कैपिटलिस्ट इकोनॉमी स्मूथली फंक्शन कर जिवो माने ता पे कोन सोशलिस्ट अंश रहइबो नै. So that is the Marxian literature, but it was successful in its attack on Hegel for subordinating the civil society to the state. जो माने हेगेल को लिटरेचर पढ़ी चंदी फिलोसॉफी दर्शन आपण जानथिबे स्टेट को यूलोगाइज कर चंदी हेगेल. You know, precisely speaking, Hegel has defined state as the march of God on earth. से कहउचंदी स्टेट होची march of God on earth. State is all powerful. You know, individual को कहंतु बा सिविल सोसाइटी को कहंतु they are subjugated by state power according to Hegel. You know, जो माने सिविल सोसाइटी बा सिविल सोसाइटी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन नो मूवमेंट रो प्रोटैगनिस्ट they have attacked the Hegelian attitude because Hegel saw in the civil society the mediating domain where the particularistic interests of the individual and the universal interests of the state would be reconciled in producing an ethical basis for the modern society. So Hegel was more concerned about the loss of morality in one society due to the non-availability of the traditional community relations. So in Hegel's view, though civil society, it embodies the unique achievement of modernity, that of the individual. It has to be organized and institutionalized through the state. And Hegel प्रत्येक समय कहते civil society को non existent बोली कोई ना किंतु it has to be organized, it has to be institutionalized through the state. Then state सबले dominate करियो. Gramsci विषय अपन जानते दी न्यू मार्क्सियन. He deepened our understanding of the civil society by extending the Marxian logic, say to the new Marxists. So instead of depicting civil society as only embodying the practices of production and exchange relations, the Gramscian notion characterizes it as a set of social relations which stand between the individual and the state. Martial literature depicts करछि सब लोग social ଗୋଟେ productive relations of production and relation of the forces of production को depend करी से societal relation को define करछन्ती. किंतु Gramscians, the new Marxians, ସେମାନେ कहउछन्ती that also is a set of social relationship, not only economic. It is social relations which stand between the individual and the state. So consent is produced for the dominance of the state through the hegemonizing impulses. So in his revolutionary strategy, Gramsci demands an alliance of all the opponents of the bourgeoisie to be led by the proletariat. And this alliance, Gramsci argues, should hegemonize the civil society in order to challenge and reorder the political society. So the political implication of the Gramscian notion seems to be crucial. Excuse just for a minute. I take this. So hello, excuse, sorry. So Gramscian notion regarding civil society is very crucial. Though historically, the space provided by the civil society, it has been appropriated and hegemonized by the dominant classes. It suggests possibilities for the reappropriation of the civil society by other social actors. So there are many scholars, those who worked in this particular concept of civil society. In recent times, theorists like Partho Chatterjee, Sudipta Kabiraj, they have given very interesting arguments regarding civil society. They are Indian scholars in the third world countries and India in particular. So theorists like Partho Chatterjee or Sudipta Kabiraj point out the fallibility and the incompatibility of the Western ideas and the forms of governance which have been imposed through colonial intervention. So the institutions, the analysis imposed by the Westerners and the uncritical application of this concept of state and civil society to evaluate the Indian situation, it has caused many distortions. So according to these scholars, Indian scholars, The state in India is less extensive than those in the Western counterparts. And using the Western critique of the state to argue for the withdrawal of the state is spurious. So, Partha Chatterjee and scholars like him, they attribute the rise of various forms of populism within Indian democracy to the evolution of the political society. Then, in this context, another relevant discussion should be on new social movements. Please remember the distinction between the old and new movements are not because of time. That the movements in the older time are old movements. In the new, in the recent periods, of the recent past, they are the new movements. They are not time specific. They are different in their characteristics. The earliest social movements in India could be traced to the Gandhian efforts of Sarvodaya, because Gandhi felt the need of social change, but he believed that the change has to come from the bottom to the top. It is to be non-violent, should be based on ahimsa. And Sarvodaya is the direct offshoot of Gandhian's constructive program. So, the ideological paradigms of Sarvodaya sought to create a stateless and classless society of Gram Swaraj, establish the principle of sharing voluntarily through Bhudan, Gramdan, developing village industries, cottage industries, agro-industrial communities, and applying Gandhian concept of trusteeship in individual activities. Since 1970s, a number of social movements emphasizing on a range of basic issues, they have come to dominate the sphere of civil society. They are called the new social movements. And they are new in contrast to the old trade unions, working class movements. हमें जो peasant movements or working class movements these are the old movements. But these new movements, they have come up in contrast with these old movements. And these movements, they are the result of the broad-based people's response to issues like gender, issues like caste conflict, ecology. So the most distinguishing feature of these new movements is that they are not homogeneous and differ in their origins. Some scholars like Raja, they point out that some of the people's movements have been sustained over time. Others are eruptions and they die down after a while. Similarly, some of the grassroots experiments, they represent the needs of change, while others are mere bubbles. So Vignaraja, he further elaborates on how to differentiate between a seed and a bubble. Seed can be identified with such broad aims as equality and access to resources, equality of social, political, cultural rights, real participation in all decisions affecting the people. It is not, however, merely a matter of setting these objectives. Genuine participations, self-production or self-management, autonomy, solidarity, and innovativeness. And what about the bubble? On the other hand, it is a soft process. Bubble is a soft process and may not last for a variety of reasons. So, Vignanas alerts us to the fact that bubbles should not be outrightly dismissed as they may represent entry points to change. So, Self-Employed Women's Association, the CHIPCO movement, Kerala Science Movement, Narmada Bachao Andolan, these are the seats in point. There are innumerable other movements as well, differing in degree of mobilization, conscientization, organization for development and democracy. Some of the new social movements, they have highlighted issues of great concern to the people and ecology. I mean to say, environment. CHIPCO deserves to be listed foremost. CHIPCO movement ବିଷୟରେ ଆମେ ଅଳ୍ପ ବହୁତ ସମସ୍ତେ ଜାଣିଛେ ବି ବାରମ୍ବାର ଅନେକ ଲିଟରେଚର କୁହାଯାଇଛି. This movement articulated the concerns of the forest-based communities, such as depletion of forest, erosion of soil, and consequent landslides, then the drying up of the local streams, other water resources, shortage of fuel, water, and domestic consumptions. So, this movement also raised its voice against the construction of Tehri Dam, which threatened the eviction of around 25,000 hilly residents. And Chico movement was a non-violent resistance movement. And also it was guided by the Gandhian spirit, Gandhian philosophy. Another major movement has been also that of Anna Hazare, which has been fighting since more than 2 decades for bringing about transparency in bureaucracy and the state. His movement has changed his village, Ralegaon Siddhi in Maharashtra, into a model village. Anna Hazare's movement emphasizes the right of the common people. And also, you must be knowing about the Apico movement. Similarly, in the lines of the Chipko movement, it was in the Western Ghat region in the state of Karnataka. And the slogan of the Chipko movement was ecology in economy. Another movement also is Narmada Bachao Andolan, which was led by leaders like Medha Patkar. So Narmada Bachao Andolan, even we can cite the example of Sep Chilta movement in Odisha, which was also an environmental movement in support of the Odisha Kusa Samaj and some of the Maslivi organizations of the place. Because shrimp culture by the Tatas was finally, it has withdrawn its project. So these are the movements fighting for protection of environment, protection of ecology, And also there are many other issues, related movements prioritizing issues related to women, Dalit empowerment, land use and pollution. So new social movements, they have come up with the issues for women, environment, Dalits. So women movements also can be categorized as the new social movement. Environmental movements can be categorized as the new social movements. So new social movements, they are the agents of radical democracy. The new social movements are indicators of the pulse of the people, that they are no longer ready to accept the developmental paradigm that kept them out and preclude their participation. So hitherto development paradigms or models, they are not going to accept, because they say that the existing development models have little space for them for participation. Their question was not taken up. Issues related to their livelihood, they are not properly considered. So there is no point in this development process. So people's movement are emerging out of the peculiar contradiction within the societies and cultures in transition. The new social movements are also bringing about the horizontal integration of the people instead of their hierarchical integration. Because, for example, environmental movement that is transnational, it cuts across the national boundaries. So the basic commitment and the fundamental ideology, for example, of the environmental movements, not only transcend the human categories of caste, class, race, religion, but also the categories of species divisions and the divisions of organic and inorganic world also. Because, this is one example that how new social movement like environmental movement, it has no national boundary. It is transnational. It cuts across caste identity, religion identity, ethnic identity, religious identity, cultural identities. Because the basic issues involved are human issues, irrespective of their identities. And in this, the NGOs, the non-government organizations, this is civil society organizations, they have taken important role to pursue these movements. And for example, the Aga Khan Rural Support Program in Gujarat, they have proposed 6 parameters in judging the quality of the NGOs activities, like people's participation, technical excellence, cost effectiveness, equity concerns for the deprived, institutional, financial, and environmental sustainability and accountability. So the greatest of the NGOs in their approach and method for listing people's participation, that is working informally in a friendly manner. They do not undertake the development as government agencies generally do, with the primacy of concern being the achievement of a certain target, irrespective of needs and priorities of the people. So government agency or NGO by non-government agency, with the essential difference is that the NGOs, they take the basic needs of the people into consideration. So this shows the need for a change in the attitude of the government agencies involving in the task of development. So only the unfolding of the political events of of the future can unfold before us, that whether the state has really succeeded or failed in this particular direction of taking of the interest of the people in the right perspective. So one also has to share the optimism of Rajani Kothari towards voluntary actions. So in the new social movements, the role of the NGOs, other voluntary sectors, they have been more emphasized side by side with the state agencies. Okay, this is time. With this, I end up discussions briefly on media and public policy, on interest groups and policy making, on identity politics based on caste, religion, language, and ethnicity, then civil society, that is with reference to social movements, NGOs, and voluntary actions. Thank you for the patient listening. So for today, we have closed our discussion. Thanks. Thanks for the patient listening.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Now, wish you all the best. Happy Ganesh Puja for tomorrow. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Best of luck for all the participants.
ଭାଇ କଣ ଆମର କିଛି ଗ୍ରୁପ ଅଛି କି WhatsApp ରେ ଏଇ ପଲିଟିକାଲ ସାଇନ୍ସ ବ୍ୟାଚ୍ ର? भाई असाइनमेंट सबमिशन डेट के कौन जानिछ कि?